Hello everybody, this is Yasmin from Yarkspiri and today I'm actually drawing a surfboarding demon. So this demon uses water as his main element in which he manipulates it, and I was going for something really different. So although I started my basic grayscale initially, I did go in afterwards and actually approach this drawing in a completely different manner, as you'll see momentarily. Now, as you can see, though, I am starting off with my really rough information, just trying to figure out a really nice dynamic pose for my surfboarder. And I was looking at a lot of reference to do this, as always. So I was looking at surfboarders and the waves specifically because I needed to understand how to paint those elements. Now, because this demon is actually able to control the water element, however, he uses this water element and forms it into a wolf-like shape. And he uses these wolves to do the attacking and the movement that he needs. So I had to work really hard to get something that was really dynamic for this and really showcase the character really well. So I was tweaking the pose a lot. Even though I had reference material, I couldn't use exactly what I was seeing either because it wasn't a dynamic enough pose in most cases, or the angle wasn't exactly what I was looking for either. So as such, I made quite a few changes along the way. And this is the final or the finalized concept for this piece. I did do some traditional theme. I did also do some traditional thumbnails, just because of all the complex elements. Once again, in this, I needed to get those elements figured out before I could actually start working on this. Now, unfortunately, last week I was sort of sick with the stomach flu, so I couldn't make a video. I did try really hard, but I couldn't. I needed the day off. I needed the rest. So this is what you're seeing this week. As you can see, I actually started off almost immediately with colors. And this was to help me figure out my palette and where I was going to go. I was using my color wheel, trying to figure out what colors I was going to use, and I was keeping everything very loose. Now, at this stage, I actually did a test run where I was trying to figure out how I was actually going to go about painting in this style, because I don't normally use this style, but I really wanted to try it out. So I did go straight to color and tried fleshing it out that way. I didn't like how it looked, so I actually redid a good portion of the character at least before I actually settled on something that I actually found worked a lot better for this entire concept. As you may know, I really like having good structure in my drawings and in my characters, so for this reason going straight to color just didn't work. I needed a little bit more of a rough idea of what I was actually going to be doing. So I tried roughing it out at this stage and then working on top of that. Didn't quite like that, so I switched it up again. And I'm trying quite a few different techniques in this that I was noticing some other artists were using. So for this reason, I was just testing it out to see how it worked. I find color-wise, this technique actually works a lot better because if you're adding the color after you've actually done your grayscale, the main problem is you end up with something that's oversaturated, and also you don't get enough color variety. I got a lot more colors intermixed within an entire character by using this method, so you might see me use it a little bit more in the future pieces as well. Because this was supposed to be such a flowing and moving piece, approaching it in this manner actually was extremely beneficial, just because water is always moving, or in this case it needed to move because it showed this character's actual power and abilities. And since that was such an important part of this character, I really need to showcase that. So as you can see, I'm actually re-roughing out the elements here, just trying to figure them out a little bit more. And I'm testing out some of my layer options before I continue. And I found this was probably the better method for what I like to do. because I'm able to really figure out, at least roughly, what I'm actually going to do with the character, just by roughing it out like this. So once I actually added my rough lines and figured out my structure, then I actually started sampling the colors within my canvas and started painting that way. I found this technique actually to be extremely quick. Because I was switching between so many different techniques, the overall draw time was actually probably about 5 hours for this entire piece, and that was with me actually restarting significant portions throughout. So if I hadn't restarted, I probably would have only spent about 3 hours on this entire drawing. So this drawing was extremely fast because I went so quickly right into color, but I was still checking my values. And what I did for that is I made sure to have a layer that I could turn on and off just to check my values to make sure I was going in the right direction. So I'm just working on the face of the character right now, sampling as I go. I'm actually rarely using my color palette, which is the default color palette I traditionally use. I'm actually manually selecting most of the colors or sampling within my canvas. I actually am doing this for a couple of reasons. It forces me to actually work on my color coordination, but I'm also referencing my colors via my color wheel, so this technique is actually more beneficial to that. Now, the further certain portions of the character are, the less detail I'm adding, and the more I'm using the actual values that I already have to actually showcase that detail. So I am trying to really make and push certain elements further back in the distance by doing this. Throughout this drawing, I didn't actually add all that much detail to the overall character. Most of it was actually kept pretty simple, just because the color actually acted as a really good means of actually implying the amount of detail I was trying to incorporate for this. So because I was using this as my main painting technique, it took a lot less time because I wasn't going over my already drawn portions. I was just doing this once or twice by tweaking elements I already had. So I'm just working on the foremost wolf figure. Now, because these characters are made out of water too, though, I didn't want to go overly detailed in those characters, but they still needed to have more detail than my character who's actually manipulating the water around him. So for this reason, I had to go back and forth between the two just to ensure that that did read correctly. I also made sure not to repeat the same poses. I made sure to alter them slightly within my two foremost characters. And in order to get some of the hair to work correctly, I was using a hairbrush to do that. It made it a lot faster. I could have easily just used my default round brush. There's no reason why I couldn't have done that. It's just this helps save a little bit more time, which is why I was doing that in this case. For most of this image, I was actually using the hard brush, a combination of the hard brush and the soft brush. I almost exclusively used those two brushes throughout the piece, and I was constantly switching between those two. When I was going into the finer details, I actually switched almost exclusively to the soft round brush just to keep me from adding too much hard edges onto my character. Also, when I was plotting out the basic colors, I was making sure to use the default round brush for that because it has a very nice blending option. Although the edges are really hard, it produces a really nice result. I'm just really trying to showcase the expression in the wolves' faces. The faces are essentially the only portion that are actually being detailed out whatsoever for these because they're essentially a extenuation of the character, so they're part of the character. Just tying in some of the colors and values that I have in my main character into my wolf figures, because I do have some of the peachy colors within the character, so I need to include that also in the wolf characters to help tie everything together. If you may have noticed, I constantly switch off my colors and move into grayscale periodically. I do that just to once again check my values to make sure everything's working correctly. Almost everything was done actually mostly with a normal layer blending option, so I didn't really have to use a color burn all that much. Just because I was working with existing colors that were within my painting, it didn't become necessary to actually include the color burn. And since those background wolves are in the background, they don't require as much detail, but they do require just enough to read as still being wolf-like shapes. So I'm keeping my brush strokes really rough for those characters, trying not to add too much detail. I've just darkened up some of those foreground elements because the closer you get to the foreground, the darker those elements would become. I'm also pushing back certain elements by including a fog-like effect on my character and just reworking some of the posing as well. I didn't use my eraser tool at all while working on this piece, just because it was easier for me to simply paint away portions that I didn't require for it. So this drawing stayed very loose and dynamic throughout. I didn't really tighten up my drawing all that much because I was using my values to actually show the detail that I wanted to come across. This was a really fun drawing. Now I did have quite a few sketches that I had done for this, so it is possible that I may actually revisit this idea in the future if I can find a more dynamic pose for it. Just because I did have quite a bit of pre-conceptual pieces I had worked on, so I may actually revisit this later on. Just because it's such a fun drawing to work on, I might actually come back to it. So I'm just lighting up certain portions once again, just to really push certain elements backwards, and I'm changing some of the colors and modifying it just so that those colors read a little bit better. So now the character is reading as being further back from the two wolf-like figures. I've just darkened those wolf-like figures a little bit more just to push that element. I've just started adding some of the water splashes, so I'm using a fog brush in order to achieve this, just to show the waves of the water that's helping to form these creatures. I'm solidifying some of those edges just to show a little bit more detail than what you actually see. And since the wolves are in the foreground, I do have to tighten them up just a tiny bit more to really showcase that. And this drawing is actually almost completed now. Just adding some minute details, checking my values once again. And now I'm actually giving a reason and a story behind what's actually occurring. So by having the water actually being manipulated by the character in his hands, it does clearly show that he's actually the one causing these wolf-like creatures to appear. So this is the final drawing. As you can see, I added some darker portions above the character, but other than that, it's what you saw me work on. So thank you guys very much for watching, and I hope to see you guys soon. Thank you and take care.